We are on now. Excellent. I can't hear myself. Anyway, my name's Fergus Barrowman. I'm the publisher at Te Herenga Waka University Press, and it's my absolute delight to be here with you this evening to launch The Book of Guilt, the amazing new novel by Catherine Chidgey. Round of applause for Catherine, please. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the University of Waikato for having us here. This is actually the 6th time in 9 years we've launched a book of yours in Hamilton. It's an astonishing... I cannot think of a more stellar middle act in a literary career than this series of amazing books. And one of the things that I love about The Book of Guilt is that it's, as has been recognised by some of the astonishing reviews it's received already, it's like the third book in a trilogy. You know, the first book, The Wish Child, launched here 9 years ago. Incidentally, on the night that Donald Trump was elected president for the first time. You know, I was sitting there during the launch looking at my phone, you know, under the bench, and the counter was sort of, anyway, happy memories. And then Remote Sympathy, and now The Book of Guilt, and it's an astonishingly interesting sort of moral trilogy about othering and about fascism and about a lack of kindness in the world. And it sort of starts with Nazi Germany, and the way Catherine has brought that through to the United Kingdom in the 1980s, I think, shows a breadth of moral vision which we should really value. And at the same time, it is, as all of the reviews said, it's an absolutely unput-downable story. There was a rave review, Kiran Das, on the radio this morning. She called it breathtakingly jaw-dropping. Or was it jaw-droppingly breathtaking? Anyway, I think putting those things together, it's like sort of 13 out of 10 on We Rate Dogs. I can't imagine a better score. So congratulations and thank you, Catherine. And I'm very pleased to call to launch the book Elizabeth Knox, another leading New Zealand novelist who I have been closely associated with for 39 years now, and published many books together. And Elizabeth is a huge fan of Catherine's work and is delighted to be with us tonight. So please welcome Elizabeth Knox.
Yeah, he's not exaggerating. I'm a huge fan of Catherine's work. It's like I get very excited, and one of the things that I'm pleased about, I guess, in my sense of my own usefulness in the world, which is becoming increasingly important to me as I get older, is that Catherine gives me things to read when she's still working on them, so that I can cast my evil eye upon them. Right, yeah, but a bit of like, what? Yeah. So I just had the great joy of reading The Book of Guilt over again in order to write my launch speech. And after a point I was going, no, I've got to read this again because I want to do this launch speech properly. And then it was like, oh, never mind about the launch speech. Yeah. Okay, launch speech. I want, without giving too much away, to say some things about the experience of reading this astonishing book. The Book of Guilt is beautiful, haunted, insidious and insidiously entangling, as complete in itself as the huge decaying house that is its main setting. The novel's beginning is both lyrical and matter of fact, in the tone of fable, and the voice of a person who has lived through a hidden, exceptional and painful history. Perhaps the greatest pain being that most of that history, family, home life, was happy and stable, but they were being managed, used, and nothing was as it seemed. Vincent, who tells the largest portion of the story, is one of a set of triplets being raised by 3 mothers in a shabby, cavernous institutional home, We are quickly able to gather that he and his household are strange, not to us, just to us readers, but to the everyday citizens of the novel. Us readers are wildly intrigued and alert to every clue the author patiently and confidently provides right from the opening. Catherine's sense of timing with the story's revelation is perfect. And right from the start, we are under the spell of her world's strangeness and its familiarity. Here are the cultural artefacts of Britain in the late 70s and early 80s, the toys, the television, the board games, the lusted after teenaged fashion, the recognisable political figures in the news. But within the first few pages of the novel, we sit in with the triplets on a history lesson and discover that this isn't our world, but a history as if gradually twisted off our timeline sometime in the 1930s or 40s. So, no one won the war. Treaties were signed. British science benefited from questionable wartime experimentation. Those people didn't die for nothing, the boys are told in their lesson. Those sequestered boys, with a disease they can't seem to shake, with many different treatment regimens, and sleeping each night in a room with many empty rooms around them which once housed other children just like them. The Book of Guilt is a masterpiece of suspense among the other kinds of masterpiece it is. It's a page turner, and you're probably going to want to read it at least twice because a second reading will make you laugh and worry and bite your nails even more. The Book of Guilt is the epitome of what characterises Catherine Chidgey's novels. The superb invention, the patient work on making us care about the characters and their situations, the moral force of her art. Details that are startling and perfectly correct, abundant, layered, every little invention and observation a part of the great spell of the novel. Then there's the clear-eyed judgment and compassion, the wondering and humour and intelligence. The characters imagined with exactitude, the innocence, especially Vincent of the Scott House triplets, and Nancy, loved and almost venerated by her parents, but forced to sit in her wardrobe when tradesmen come into the house to fix things. It's these innocents who the reader walks alongside while they work things out. Vincent and Nancy and the not quite so innocent, compassionate but compromised minister of loneliness. There's a richness and dynamism to all the characters, even those we meet only in passing. Nobody is an imagined body just for the purposes of the plot. They're there to be enjoyed. They speak to Vincent or Nancy or the minister, and we can hear them thinking. And the main supporting cast, the people driven by rage and sorrow into horrible acts, characters fatally bleeding their self-respect, characters who are cowardly and twisted. There's even a very plausible version of someone we know from history. It's history and human nature that this book is pressing on, to pin it down, to extract the juice. The Book of Guilt is, in many ways, about the near misses of history, which is why it is a book for this moment, these times. It could be now, it could be here, because the way its villains represent themselves to themselves and others is brisk, practical, hard-headed, grown-up, reasonable in manner, and all in the aid of a self-congratulatory, paternalistic cruelty that is, sadly, all too familiar. The Book of Guilt is a masterful work by a master, a self-sufficient and self-sustaining work of literature that I'm confident will be read 100 years from now, in better times, having helped those better times arrive. So congratulations, Catherine.
Oh, thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was really beautiful. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, everyone, for coming, including those joining us online. Thanks to the University of Waikato for hosting tonight's launch, to our PVC, Tim Smith, and to all my colleagues for supporting my writing. Thanks to Ashley and Kiva for doing all the organisation for tonight, and to Poppies for selling the books. Please support them generously. And thank you, Elizabeth, for launching the book and for lending tonight some of your sparkle. I'm so lucky to be publishing my 9th novel with Te Herenga Waka University Press. So thank you to Fergus and Ashley, Kiva and team for turning my manuscripts into beautiful books, and to Todd Atticus for his brilliant work on the cover. Thanks to my agent in London, Carolyn Dorney, and her colleagues at United Agents, and to Martin Shaw, who looks after me in Australia. Thanks to Christopher Potter and my overseas publishers, Penguin Random House Australia, Knopf Canada, Hachette in the US, and John Murray in the UK. Thanks to publicist extraordinaire Penny Hartle, and to my editors, Jane Parkin and Sarah Ream, for saving me from myself too many times to count. I still think "she nodded" can be a speech tag, and they'll have to tell me off about it all over again next time, because I'm still going to do it. Thank you to Jennifer Campion and Anne Ferrier-Watson for helping me with some really tricky copyright questions. Special thanks to Sue Orr and to Elizabeth for their wise and patient feedback on the manuscript, and to my sister Helen for driving me around Exeter so I could look at bungalows and snap photos out of the car window when the locals weren't watching. And special thanks also to my old friend Virginia Fenton in the UK for chauffeuring me around the New Forest, and being a horsey girl, advising me on how not to describe the New Forest ponies. She traipsed through a lot of former stately houses, so places that are now hotels and restaurants and wedding venues, waiting without cringing too openly while I asked the staff if I could please have a behind-the-scenes tour, because I was a novelist and needed to know what the plumbing looked like. Virginia also accompanied me on a traumatic visit to the private museum of Major Percy Horace Gordon Powell Cotton. It was crammed with hundreds of horrifyingly taxidermied animals, including a very surprised-looking wildebeest, none of which even made it into the novel. I'm so sorry about that, V. I know you're watching on YouTube at a very early hour in the UK. And also on the seafront at Margate, where we tracked down the shelter in which T.S. Eliot wrote Part 3 of The Wasteland. Virginia indulged me while I sat down in the shelter and demanded she take photos of me writing a bit of my novel on my phone. The book is dedicated to Bill Manhire, who championed my work way back last century, and showed the manuscript of my first unfinished novel to Carolyn in London, who then agreed to be my agent. And I'm so grateful to Bill for that early faith in me. And finally, thank you to Alan and Alice for their love and support. And in fact, we should all thank Alan for talking me out of my original terrible idea for the book. I can't even tell you what it was. It was so terrible. It involved a Hitler impersonator. I've said too much. And I'm so grateful to Alice for giving the best hugs and back rubs when the writing isn't going well, and for watching The Traitors with me when the writing isn't going well, and for turning to me at the appropriate moment when we're watching The Traitors so we can say in unison, "The time for talk is over."
I got it. So, Catherine, the time for talk is not over. I have some questions for Catherine, and during the questions there will be readings.
Yes,
so,
a couple of micro readings.
yes, so you should just say when you're going to do the readings according to the questions, but shall I just start?
Just
fire
away.
Fire all in.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Shall we move that? your glory? Oh, thank you,
yes,
Kirsty.
actually, no, the idea of people seeing me is like, maybe not.
Sorry.
Anyway. Okay, so, questions. One of the many things you do beautifully is to describe a highly organised, routine-bound existence that's reported on as everyday by the characters, but that gradually shows itself as mad, peculiar, and hair-raising. Could you tell us a bit about the invention?
Yeah. So the book, I've got a lapel mic. So I needed my hands to hold the book when I do the reading. So the book opens with Vincent, one of the 13-year-old triplets in this grand old crumbling home in the heart of the New Forest on the fringes of this small village called Ashbridge. And it opens quite idyllically, really, with him talking about their childhood before everything changed. But as soon as the second paragraph, we start to realise, oh, this isn't quite our world, because that second paragraph mentions that the home and the other homes like it that were part of the Sycamore scheme were bought in 1944 after the war. And so I wanted to drop little clues like that history has unfolded differently from in our world, but I wasn't interested in kind of boringly and methodically itemizing exactly how it's different. I wanted to express that through the boys' lived experience of that world. So, for instance, again, quite early in the book, they're in the garden looking up at the moon that's visible in the daylight, and they're imagining the flags fluttering up there that were placed there in the mid-1950s, the British and the German and the American. And I don't kind of dwell on that, I just kind of include it as something they're thinking about and chatting about. So there's that wider historical perspective, but then there are also the boys' kind of smaller lives. So they talk about our mothers, and when they say that, perhaps the reader might think, well, wait, how many mothers do they have? Is that a little bit strange? And they talk about quite early Mother Afternoon, which might be another one of those little snags where the reader thinks, okay, what's going on here? So in terms of the invention, I knew really early on, once I'd got past the whole Hitler impersonator thing, I killed him off instead, which was quite satisfying. I knew quite early on that it was going to be identical triplets, and they were going to have these three mothers, Mother Morning, Mother Afternoon, and Mother Night. And so from there, I thought, well, okay, if they're going to be isolated with these mothers in this secluded home, how would that isolation look? And I started thinking about the Book of Knowledge, that in this isolation they would only have access to this set of children's encyclopedias, an 8-volume set of quite outdated children's encyclopedias, and that's their library. Those are the only books that they are exposed to and that their mothers take all their lessons from. And so, well, what would that mean then for how the boys develop? Well, that might mean that they pepper their dialogue with kind of language that's used in the Book of Knowledge, which is that really sort of old-fashioned, stiff upper lip English voice. And it might mean that when Vincent comes across Mother Night one night when he's up out of bed and shouldn't be, and she's reading a book that's not the Book of Knowledge, he says to her, well, why are you reading it? And she says, to find out what happens, of course, and how it ends. And he says to her, well, it'll be something beginning with Z, because that always comes at the end. So, you know, those small decisions about something like the only books they know was the way that I built their characters from that sort of decision. And then I thought, well, okay, if the boys don't have much exposure to the outside world, then what would the mothers teach them? Well, they might teach them morals. So once a month, they have ethical hour, where the mothers sit them down and sort of ask them these impossible questions like, a building is on fire, and you can either save one child from the burning building, or you can save a valuable painting which, when sold, would raise enough money to save 20 starving children. What do you do? And I had so much fun coming up with those questions, and really a lot of them were ones that I remembered from religious education class at my Catholic school. So
The trolley problem.
The trolley problem, yeah. And you know, the answer to those questions is always, well, there is no answer. There is no sort of proper ethical answer to those impossible questions. And then I made the decision that the homes were going to be closed by the incoming government, and the boys will be placed into the community, and so will the other remaining children at the other Sycamore homes throughout the country. So what will that mean then? And how will they be prepared for that? And so then I decided, well, they'll have things called socialisation days, where 3 girls from one of the girls' homes are brought to socialise with them and to practice small talk and manners and dancing. And it's all very stilted and awkward and kind of teenage and recognisable for anyone who's been an awkward 13-year-old, which is just about everyone in this room, I would say, not you yet. But also kind of creepy and weird, and that's the vibe I think I was going for, that it's, a lot of it is recognisable and certain touchstones will chime for the reader, but a lot of it too is not quite right and is quite unsettling.
It sort of feels like it's a combination of being managed in a kind of a comfortable everyday way, being managed in a I'm really bored with my job way by the mothers, and being managed as if there's something terrible around the corner.
Yeah,
you know?
there is something terrible around the corner. I'm so sorry.
It's always there, all of those things going at once.
Yeah. And then with Nancy, who is another 13-year-old in the book, who's also kept in isolation, but in this case with her parents in Exeter, so she's never been allowed to leave the house her whole life. And I thought about, well, how would that affect her? So the invention with her was that she learns most of what she knows about the world from watching TV and from watching shows like The Generation Game and The Two Ronnies and Antiques Roadshow, but also Jim Will Fix It, starring Jimmy Savile. And so we, the reader, there's that moment of dramatic irony where we, the reader, know you probably shouldn't be, tuning into Jimmy Savile, or even thinking about writing a letter to Jimmy Savile, as children did, saying, "Dear Jim, can you please fix it so that, I can turn into Wonder Woman, or, I can ride one of the Queen's horses, or you can save me from being kept in confinement by my parents." And so she considers, writing to Jimmy Savile, and the reader is kind of screaming at the page going, don't go down that track. Save yourself from that. But to her, that's kind of the logical path to take. And in terms of inventing the structure of the book, that came to me quite early on when I was thinking about these 3 books that are in the novel. So first of all, the Book of Dreams, which is a ledger that the mothers write all the boys' dreams and nightmares in. And so
They have a reason.
They have a reason. So Mother Morning comes to their bedroom early each day and wakes them and asks them one by one, what did you dream about, and writes it down in the Book of Dreams. And so that's the first section of the book. It's called the Book of Dreams, when the boys are still in this dreamy state of unawareness and not really understanding what goes on beyond the glass-topped walls of their house. And the second section is named after the encyclopedias and is called the Book of Knowledge, which is the part in the book where they do begin to question everything they thought they knew about their lives and who they are and who the mothers are and who Dr. Roach is, who comes to visit them every 2 months and keeps on top of the medicine that they have to take every day to ward off this mysterious illness called the bug. And the third section is the Book of Guilt, which is in the book the ledger that all their misdemeanors are written up in, but also a kind of nod to where the boys end up and the kind of burden that they have to carry with them for the rest of their lives.
And also that they're a symbol of a burden that society has to carry, whether it wants to or not, really.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to jump right to the question about writing a revenge narrative.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite funny that you said, where's the revenge narrative?
I know, Elizabeth.
You had a moment.
I know, I did. I've been quite busy and quite tired lately. And Elizabeth emailed me her questions, and one of them was, there's a revenge narrative in this novel. Do you like revenge stories, and was this one fun to write? And I sat there thinking, what's the revenge narrative? And then she told me, and of course I remembered, oh yeah, I did write that, and that's quite a big part of the story. So it's also something that's a little bit difficult to talk about without giving spoilers.
Yes, because you don't want to give it away. But I guess the thing is that the thing is about revenge narratives is if you commit to them inside anything, there's always a degree of extravagance, and in this it's kind of a hidden extravagant revenge that's happening, and it's a balancing act, isn't it? Without giving anything away, did you have trouble with it?
No, I loved writing that part of it, actually. I mean, don't we all want to act out our darkest fantasies of revenge? So I really wallowed in that storyline, actually. It's quite a cruel storyline. And I think the kernel for that was thinking about what do you do when you know that you need to move on from a terrible event in your life? And how do you heal from that or try to put that right and to feel as if some sort of justice has been done? What can the worst events in our lives drive us to do? Yeah. Was what I was thinking about with that storyline, and how corrosive revenge can be, and how it can blind us to everything that's good in our lives, so that we can only see through this tunnel vision. No, I want to take revenge on that person or those people.
But it's also got the parallel in the excessive planning in life. Yeah, that's playing out over the whole novel with boys' lives, society. It's like everybody's been overwhelmed by this urge to be, they're being right about things. They're planning other people's lives. They know what's best for people, etc., etc.
Yeah, and the characters who are wanting to exact revenge do put a lot of planning into that act too. And I didn't want to make it melodramatic or sensationalist, the thing that they do and the thing that they're planning. So it's all quite sort of quiet and everyday and seems kind of normal within their sphere that they would be planning this thing. And when it actually happens, the reaction of people around them is not shock. And that felt like quite a chilling turn that the story took when I settled on that. You can tell it's really hard to talk about this without giving anything away, but the reaction to the people around them at what they had done was, that's their right, and I found that quite awful.
It's that matter-of-factness that. Yeah. Okay, so my other questions, because I like my questions, but you've answered them.
Should we do a reading soon?
Yes, do a reading.
Okay. You were good. Do you want to ask me number 2? Because that kind of ties into the reading.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yes, I'm messing up your plan.
No, that's all right.
All right. Okay, so you're amazingly good at keeping us reading when we're mystified and uncertain about the story. Part of that is how attracted we are to the characters as they experience themselves. Can you talk a bit about that? How you make us care about the world as the characters make sense of it, just as much as we care about finding out what's really going on. We want to know about what they see just as much as we want to know about what they can't see.
Yeah, so like I said, the Book of Dreams comes up really early in the book, and that first section is called the Book of Dreams. And I want the reader at that point to kind of sit with uncertainty and to not fully understand what this world is and who the boys are. The same as the boys don't know really who they are and what this world is that they're living in. So I'll read you a little section that has Vincent visiting Ashbridge Village for one of the first times, and you'll get a feeling for his sensory delight of the shops in the village, but also see how the villagers react to him and talk about him being amongst them. Okay. Shall I stay here or shall I stand up? I'll stay here, as long as you can see me over there. All right, maybe I will stand up. There we go. Okay. So, when Mother Afternoon needed some wire to support the flowers in a new ikebana arrangement, she gave me some money and told me not to dawdle. I knotted the coins inside a handkerchief, pushed them deep into a pocket so they couldn't fall out, and set off. Wild strawberries were ripening under the hedgerows, and I stopped and ate as many as I could, careful to check for weevils. I wiped my fingers on the grass rather than on my trousers, which would have been thoughtless and made more work for Mother Afternoon when she had quite enough on her plate. In the high street, two young mothers were pushing their babies in gleaming white prams, and they watched me as if they'd never seen me or my brothers before. When they'd passed, I heard one murmur to the other, "Pitiful creature, really. He's never known love." Her friend said, "Of course not. They don't respond like we do." Did they mean me? Was I the pitiful creature? I wanted to run back and tell them that even though we were orphans and sometimes felt poorly, we'd known love. We knew love. We had 3 mothers. 3. Who else could say that? But we weren't allowed to make conversation with people unconnected with our errands. The bell above the corner shop jangled as I let myself in. I could smell the bacon that Mr. Kendrick sliced on the big silver machine, and the cheese and the loose biscuits in their tins on the counter. The sweets shone in their jars, rhubarb and custards, aniseed balls, humbugs, sugar mice. I lingered beside the straw-filled wicker basket where the lucky bags were buried, each containing an assortment of sweets and a plastic toy. I longed to plunge my hand in and feel around for the most promising bag. Who knew what you might get? A tiny deck of cards, a whistle, a compass. I'd seen village children pull out such treasures. At home, I kept my one and only lucky bag, empty now, folded away with my private things, along with the toy I'd found inside, a plastic soldier with a parachute that used to bear him safely to the ground before it tore. Mr. Kendrick appeared from the back room, and I thought I saw something pass across his face, a flicker of uneasiness perhaps, or even fear, but it happened so fast I couldn't catch it. To Vincent in that scene, it's the mothers pushing their babies who are the strange people, who are sort of having this strange reaction to them. Don't they realise we have 3 mothers, and of course we've known love. And at this point in the book, that's how he understands this world, that the people out there are the strange ones, and they're the normal ones. But in this world of his that's quite idyllic still at this point, there's always the possibility of weevils in the strawberries, and there's always the possibility of the parachute tearing. And so those are, the kinds of little details that I'm dropping in, those little sort of touches of darkness and of things going wrong, to turn up that sense of uneasiness in the reader.
And to keep them alert.
Yeah.
Yeah, you keep them alert. Well, that was sort of part of my questions, was that you're intriguing us with these big, strange things, and you slowly let us in on the conditions of existence rather than on what is happening. And how do you make those decisions about revelations, like timing of revelations? Is this just you're writing and you think, yes, and here we are at that moment. It has arrived. This is the right place.
I did want to drip feed those moments of knowledge, and I do remember making a list of all of them quite early on in the writing of the book, and actually making a graph of the peaks and troughs of the story so that I could time them, so that they weren't all kind of bunched up, and so that
I knew it.
most tricky was the Minister of Loneliness, because she knows what's been going on, and she talks about it to an interviewer in her first scene in the book. She does a television interview about the closure of the Sycamore homes and the release of the children into the community. And she also talks to the Prime Minister about it. So I needed to have those scenes, but I also needed to not give everything away in those scenes.
She doesn't know one key thing, though.
She doesn't know one key thing.
She's been kept in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I decided to do to overcome that problem was to have people like the interviewer and the Prime Minister be a little bit coy about what the truth is. The way that slippery people like that can be really coy and sort of talk around big issues and use euphemisms and not kind of say direct to camera, this is the terrible thing that I don't really want to put into words because it might reflect badly on me. And I was quite pleased when I finally kind of reached that understanding of how to present her character. I always like making something positive out of a problem in a book, and kind of overcoming barriers to the story by coming up with a workaround that actually works better than what my first instinct might have been.
Yeah, there is usually a workaround. You've just got to have the courage to go, okay, well, I'm shifting from this raft that I was on when the ship sunk to that abandoned lifeboat over there.
And you have to
swim.
You have to have wise, trusted readers like Elizabeth and Sue to send the tattered manuscript to and say, please tell me what I should do.
It's fun, actually. Yeah, it's the level at which Catherine's operating is actually, it's very crunchy. Yes, as a person doing a bit of story doctoring, I'm like, ooh.
You and Sue, I think it was you actually first, and then Sue chimed in and agreed, which was annoying. Said, don't use the title, the Minister of Loneliness. Yeah, you did. And I said, no, you're wrong about that, even though you were right about lots of other things. I think everything else.
No, I think the thing is that it was partly her sections weren't right at that. Yeah, they're modulated, yes. And now it just seems right. And it's because it's never explained why she's called the Minister of Loneliness, per se.
Well, she deals with prisoners and with, orphans who are being sent out into the community.
Yes, people in social housing who are like down and out.
But the idea for that came from me stumbling across a news story about the Japanese Minister of Loneliness, that is an actual position, and I was really taken by that when I first read it and thought, thank you, I'll have that for my book. And then I think when I'd finished writing the book, but before it was published in about the early 2020s, there was a real Minister of Loneliness, the position established in the UK. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, it makes sense.
I don't know what she does.
It makes sense the Japanese did it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to do your other reading before the last question or after the last question?
I will do it, I think, after the last question. Yeah.
Yes, that would be right, I
Okay.
think. Yeah. All right. Okay, last question. Philip Matthews' review in Newsroom positions this novel as related in its concerns to the wish child and remote sympathy. Those books deal more explicitly with what the Nazis did. This novel is a counterfactual about a more fascist Britain. Then Claire Mabey says the novel is not only a terrifically compelling read, but an alarm bell. When you were writing it, was this in your mind, where we are now with, for instance, eugenics again rearing its ugly head?
No, I don't think it was, but it is curious how that happens, how a work in progress can somehow start to mirror what the news headlines are. I mean, I think it's always been a concern of mine, and it was in books like The Wish Child and Remote Sympathy too, considering what the awful end point might be if actions are taken for the greater good. And that's a phrase that always bothers me, because if we're thinking about the greater good, well, we're not thinking about the possibly quite large majority who will suffer from those decisions and who will be sacrificed if we're taking action for the greater good. And those people are kind of minimised and ignored by So through the character of the Minister of Loneliness, I want the readers to think about what would I have done in her shoes, or what would I have done if I was living in this world? And it's something that I ask of readers in the two Nazi Germany novels as well. You know, given that there is this significant population who are not going to benefit from this decision made for the greater good, you know, what am I going to do with that knowledge once I understand what these decisions are that are being made, and now I'm complicit in them because I have that knowledge and I can't unknow it? What will I do? So yeah, I enjoyed developing the Minister of Loneliness's character as she becomes more and more knowledgeable about what exactly has been going on. Yeah. Shall I finish with a reading?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is the Minister of Loneliness's first visit to the home, and she gets talking to Vincent in the library. So it's just the two of them in this scene, and she's looking at the books on the shelf in the library, which are obviously the 8 volumes of the Book of Knowledge, but also photograph albums showing the boys over the years, and the Book of Dreams and the Book of Guilt. Okay. I was close enough to make out all the detail on her brooch, the angel in the filmy gown holding the sleeping babies. I could see the sash carved at the angel's waist, the tendrils of hair drifting behind her, the toenails on her bare feet, the shape of her body beneath her gown. "She's very beautiful, isn't she?" said the minister in a quiet voice. "Very beautiful," I said. "She was carved from a shell. Look how the artist used the dark upper layer for her hair and then carved deeper to the white layer for the rest of her." "Yes," I said. I'd never seen a brooch like it. "Who is she?" "Nyx, the Greek goddess of night." We'd never learned about her. I didn't know her. "And the babies?" I said. "Her children, Hypnos and Thanatos." I studied the tiny chain that hung from one edge, a tiny pin fixing it to the lapel. "What's that for?" "In case the main pin fails, so I don't lose the brooch." "Has it ever failed?" "Well, no." I moved closer still. "Made from a shell." "A real shell. It's called a cameo." I took down volume 8, Fact Index of the Book of Knowledge, and looked for the word camellia, camelopard, camelot, camembert, cameo, and then I turned to the entry in BOO to CRO. "An engraved gem or seashell bearing a design cut in relief," I read aloud. The art was at its height in the 1st century AD, but after the end of the 18th century, few further cameos were made, as forgery was easy and the art fell into disrepute. It is little practiced today. "Oh," said the minister, "I don't think mine's a forgery." "I'm sure it's not," I said. "But how could you tell?" "Is it from Margate?" I asked. "Margate?" "Where we go when we get better." She was looking blank. "Where the big house is, with the stained glass windows of grapevines and fish with their mouths open." "Fish," she said. "They have all sorts of things made from shells there." "Oh, I don't know," she said, with a fleeting frown. "It belonged to my grandmother. My mother never liked it, so she gave it to me. She is not a kind woman, my mother. I don't think she ever wanted children. Well, I know she didn't because she's told me so many times. No, not kind. But sometimes we love those who are not kind to us." I reached out a finger and touched the cool, polished surface of the brooch, the folds of the gown, the ridges of the feathers. Faintly, ever so faintly, I felt her trembling.
Thank you, Catherine. That was just wonderful, and I am now satisfied with all my curiosity. Yeah. Okay, so I suppose that what remains for me is to say the books are for sale.
I will be sitting there signing.
She will be sitting there signing, and
Alison will be sitting there selling.
And Alison will be selling, and they're going like hotcakes. So get in, yeah, and Well done.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
fabulous.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Elizabeth.